Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you are watching my walkthrough for The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Wii U and Switch. So once you have completed all 4 of these shrines that are here on the Great Plateau, which I did in the previous 2 videos, then the old man will make an appearance and say that it's finally time. He had promised us that he was going to give us the Paraglider after we have completed the shrines, and that's true, he's going to do that. However, first he wants us to go meet him at a specific location. He says that if you were to draw an invisible X on your map that connects all of the different 4 shrines that are here on the Great Plateau, then that place where the lines intersect is where he's going to be waiting for you. So, where would that X be? It turns out to be none other than the giant temple that's in the middle of the Great Plateau. So, work your way over to that dilapidated temple, and the easiest way to get there is just to use your map to warp to one of the 2 lower shrines, so either the Aman-Au or the Jabaij shrine, or you can warp to the tower, or even the Shrine of Resurrection. All of those are blue icons on your map. The Shrine of Resurrection is probably the closest overall, so if you warp to that one, make a hard right, you can get to the temple pretty easily. Once you arrive, you'll see in the distance that there is actually a shining pillar of light that is now on the statue that was in the middle of the temple that you may have checked out before. And if you inspect it, it'll actually talk to you, and it says that you can hand in the 4 spirit orbs that we've collected from the shrines, and for 4 of them you can get either a heart container or a stamina vessel. So it's up to you to decide which one you want to do. My personal recommendation is I highly recommend getting the stamina vessel because it'll make climbing a lot easier. We're going to be doing a lot of climbing here very shortly, so it makes really nice to have early on. The hearts are not as valuable as you would think, and ironically enough, there's actually advantages to only having 3 hearts, but I'll be talking more about that in later videos. So if you did inspect the statue, then the old man will call out to you from the roof. This is actually an optional piece of dialogue, but it's probably what most people will do just because of that ray of light. It's just too good not to inspect, so this is probably what most of you will experience. So our objective is to get on top of the roof, and the statue is actually optional. This is our primary objective, is actually to speak with the old man. So you can climb up on the roof, and the best way to do that is to take the nearby ladder. This is actually the first playthrough where I realized there was a ladder here, which is really silly. I've been apparently climbing up the entire time and using stamina food, which is not the most efficient way of doing this at all. So I feel kind of silly now. Whoops. But yeah, if that's you, just know that you're not alone. I did that too. So I thought there was a Korok off to the left. I was mistaken, but what I do think is cool, and that was kind of frightening how I jumped off the cliff, and I don't have the paraglider yet, but look at these Triforce symbol here. I think it's sweet. It actually labels which one is power, wisdom, and courage. I think this is the first piece of architecture that very clearly defines which one's which of the different directions of the Triforce. But anyways, I think that's cool. In particular, wisdom and courage, because they're on the bottom. When you're done messing around, go to the highest point of the temple and meet up with the old man.
Well done there, young one. Now then, the time has come to show you who I truly am. I was King Rome Bosphoramus Hyrule. I was the last leader of Hyrule, a kingdom which no longer exists. The Great Calamity was merciless. It devastated everything in its path, a century ago. It was then that my life was taken away from me. And since that time, here I have remained in spirit form. I did not think it wise to overwhelm you while your memory was still fragile. So rather than that, I thought it best to assume a temporary form. Forgive me. I think you are now ready. Ready to hear what happened 100 years ago. To know Calamity Ganon's true form, one must know the story from an age-long past. The Demon King was born into this kingdom, but his transformation into malice created the horror you see now. Stories of Ganon were passed from generation to generation in the form of legends and fairy tales. But there was also a prophecy. The signs of a resurrection of Calamity Ganon are clear, and the power to oppose it lies dormant beneath the ground. We decided to heed the prophecy and began excavating large areas of land. It wasn't long before we discovered several ancient relics made by the hands of our distant ancestors. These relics, the divine beasts, were giant machines piloted by warriors. We also found the Guardians, an army of mechanical soldiers who fought autonomously. This coincided with ancient legends, oft repeated throughout our land. We also learned of a princess with a sacred power, and her appointed knight, chosen by the sword that seals the darkness. It was they who sealed Ganon away using the power of these ancient relics. 100 years ago, there was a princess set to inherit a sacred power, and a skilled knight at her side. It was clear that we must follow our ancestors' path. We selected 4 skilled individuals from across Hyrule and tasked them with the duty of piloting the divine beasts. With the princess as their commander, we dubbed these pilots champions, a name that would solidify their unique bond. The princess, her appointed knight, and the rest of the champions were on the brink of sealing away Ganon. But nay. Ganon was cunning, and he responded with a plan beyond our imagining. He appeared from deep below Hyrule Castle, seized control of the Guardians and the divine beasts, and turned them against us. The champions lost their lives, those residing in the castle as well. The appointed knight, bravely wounded, lapsed while defending the princess. And thus, the kingdom of Hyrule was devastated absolutely by Calamity Ganon. However, the princess survived to face Ganon alone.
Link, you are our final hope. The fate of Hyrule rests with you.
That princess was my own daughter, my dear Zelda. And the courageous knight who protected her right up to the very end. That knight was none other than you, Link. You fought valiantly when your fate took an unfortunate turn. And then, you were taken to the Shrine of Resurrection. Here you now stand, revitalized 100 years later. The words of guidance you have been hearing since your awakening are from Princess Zelda herself. Even now, as she works to restrain Ganon from within Hyrule Castle, she calls out for your help. However, my daughter's power will soon be exhausted. Once that happens, Ganon will freely regenerate himself, and nothing will stop him from consuming our land. Considering that I could not save my own kingdom, I have no right to ask this of you, Link. But I am powerless here. You must save her, my daughter, and do whatever it takes to annihilate Ganon. Somehow, Ganon has maintained control over all 4 divine beasts, as well as those guardians swarming around Hyrule Castle. I believe it would be quite reckless for you to head directly to the castle at this point. I suggest that you make your way east out to one of the villages in the wilderness. Follow the road out to Kakariko Village. There you will find the Elder Impa. She will tell you more about the path that lies ahead. Consult the map on your Sheikah slate for the precise location of Kakariko Village. Make your way past the twin summits of the dueling peaks. From there, follow the road as it proceeds north.
So once the king is done relating his story, he will then give us the Paraglider as promised, which allows us to finally get off the Great Plateau and explore the rest of Hyrule. Fun fact, this also does remove the invisible walls of death that are also surrounding the Great Plateau. If you managed to glitch your way off, it would have killed you. So now we can finally get off here safely. Because not only can you fly down, but also those invisible things are gone, so that we've completed the tutorial is basically what this means. Now the Paraglider is pretty awesome. You can just like jump off of ledges. You just press the jump button again to deploy it, and this allows you to glide around using the analog stick to get wherever you want to. It's particularly useful if you can get to a high place such as the top of this temple, or on top of the towers in particular. So all the towers scattered around Hyrule, it's very useful because you can warp to them and then just glide down wherever you want to go. So I would highly recommend you seek out the towers as soon as possible. Alright, the final highlight that you should really do is if you do not have the warm doublet yet, you should totally go to the old man's house in the southern portion of the Great Plateau, and there's now a chest there that contains it. So the three different ways of getting the warm doublet is, first of all, to cook him the meal before you ever ascend Mount Hylia. You can talk to him at the very tip top of Mount Hylia, or after you've completed all 4 shrines and gotten the Paraglider, then you can go to his house to get it. Alright, so those are kind of the 3 highlights here on the Great Plateau, is getting all 4 shrines, getting the Paraglider, and then optionally getting the warm doublet. So if you have all those 3 things, that's everything we really have to do. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to do a little bit more optional stuff, including getting a bunch of Koroks seeds, getting a whole bunch of arrows, including fire arrows and ice arrows, as well as regular arrows, because those are going to be handy here upcoming. And then I'm finally going to kill the Talus that is here on the Great Plateau, which a lot of you might have encountered in this and then died because he just will make you explode. He's pretty awful. He does a lot of damage. So that's one of the things I'm going to be doing for the rest of this video. So I have 2 priorities right now. I'm trying to get some arrows so then I can go attack the Talus, and I really want arrows for my bow for that. And the second priority is that I want a bunch of Korok seeds like on the way towards Kakariko. And that's so that I can get a bunch of the weapon upgrades right away. And then after that, I'm kind of going to ignore Korok seeds for a good majority of the walkthrough, actually. So I'm going to get a bunch of Korok seeds in the next several videos, and then I'm not going to get any, basically. So that's what I'm trying to do. So that being said, I recommend you hang out with me to get Korok seeds in particular, and getting them on the Great Plateau, because the Great Plateau Korok seeds are some of the easiest ones in the entire game. And if you're going to get some early, it might as well be here. So if those things don't interest you, you can skip ahead to the next video, otherwise follow along with me. Now what's actually happening on screen is the fact that I rewound a little bit. What happened is I did a whole bunch of goodies on the Great Plateau, and then I went to the temple to get the Paraglider. So in the video you're currently watching, we're back in time a little bit, and I don't actually have the Paraglider yet, and that's why. So I'm just putting all the optional stuff at the end of the video is why I set it up this way. I'm just trying to get all the necessary stuff out of the way first. So if you want to hang out with me, then you can warp to the Kainamut Shrine. Just outside of it, there is a pool next to it that has a chest containing an opal. You can get to it pretty easily just using Cryonis several times, and something to know about Cryonis is you can use it to pull things out of the water, or lift things out of the water, I should say. So chests and stuff that are floating on the surface, and also sometimes fish. As long as fish are pretty close to the surface, Cryonis will actually suck them out of the water entirely, and they'll be like flopping around on top of the Cryonis block. It's great. So what I'm doing in these videos is I'm working my way kind of clockwise around the Great Plateau, just collecting things as I go, just getting the highlights. And what we're going to do with these cliffs is if you don't have the Paraglider yet, you just want to like steadily work your way down from one path to another. You can see like here, this portion of this cliff is like a little bit more shallow. There's a little bit of ridges here that you can land on, so you don't take full damage if you just jump all the way down. Up ahead there is an ice keys. Ice keys are a little bit rough. You do want to avoid them because right after they die still, like so if you use bombs for example, that they'll go flying afterwards, and they can still freeze you while they're still, even though they're dead, they can still freeze you as their corpse is flying through the air, and that's pretty rough. So ideally you want to avoid having that happen. So what you can do is try to aim if you use bombs, try to aim the explosion in such a way where the dying keys will land in a direction that doesn't freeze you. So up ahead we have a river that is very, very cold. It's icy water. Is icy water even a thing? Wouldn't that just be ice at that point? If it's cold enough to be called icy water, wouldn't it just be ice? It's really cold water. So watch out for the really cold water because you take damage every second while you're in it. It's pretty awful, or every 0.5 seconds or 0.25 seconds. I don't know what it is. It's really fast though. Hurts you really bad. So what you want to do is you just jump in the water and then quickly inspect it to collect the Korok, which I missed, and then I tried to heal and somehow I still did not manage to climb up fast enough, so I totally died. But yeah, it's awful. Water's horrible. So try not to, I would recommend you don't even do this one until you have more health. I just thought I'd try it. I was like, I don't have much health, but it'll be fine. So anyway, I worked my way back to the bridge, and here we have a giant piece of metal that is on top of these little pillars, and then there's another piece of metal in the distance. I think, actually, now the more I'm looking at it, what they're intending you to do is use magnesis to complete the rest of the bridge using that other piece of metal. I don't think that's even worth messing with. I would just use Cryonis to get across. But what I do think the pieces of metal are awesome for is you can grab them and take them with you. Now, generally speaking, just keep an eye out for solid pieces of metal like this. Like, unlike the kind of dilapidated metal blocks, those ones will break when things happen, but other pieces of metal are solid like this, so they are not going to break, and you can honestly take them with you. Some fun fact to know, you can totally just like demolish like the entirety of the Great Plateau if you just slowly work your way forward taking this with you, because you can kill all the enemies super easy, and because it's so big, you can use it for all kinds of cool stuff like making bridges all over the place, and you can use it to like ascend big areas like this, for example. So there's a bridge actually off to the right side that has, you can see that right there, where you can shoot the ropes to like lower the bridge. So that was one way you can do that. The ropes that are holding it up, you can shoot them to make the bridge lower. But instead, I'm just going to use this piece of metal to get up instead, and that's awesome. So you can use this piece of metal to climb all kinds of things on the Great Plateau. So if you just steadily work your way around, and take this with you, then you can do that. One word of warning, though, is just know that if you like save and load, for example, loading your game will reset the position of metal objects and stuff like that. So that giant metal door will actually disappear. Continuing on to the north, there is a tower here, and I'm going to climb it to get some arrows at the top. Now remember, at this point in the recording, I was still working my way back towards the temple. I'm just taking the long scenic route, but I don't have the paraglider at this point in the recording. So I'm climbing this tower, and I was realizing halfway up that it was probably a mistake, so I'm going to regret this decision. By the way, I've mentioned this before, but whenever you're climbing, if you just don't dash, don't use the X button to jump, then you will use the least amount of stamina. So even though it's a little bit slower and tedious, you just keep holding up on the analog stick and you'll climb slower, but you won't use anywhere near as much stamina. So up ahead we have an enemy encampment with some of these dilapidated, broken down metal crates, and these ones will break if you are too rough with them. However, there is an interesting trick with that, by the way, is there's a certain distance you can move, or like if you move at a certain speed, then the block is moving fast enough to do damage to the enemies, but not fast enough where the box is taking damage. So you can actually, if you just move kind of slow, if you move too slow, it doesn't do anything. You just kind of push them around. If you move fast enough, it'll do damage. But if you move too fast, then the box will take damage and eventually break. So if you find that sweet spot right in between, you can actually use these for a very long time. That's particularly useful on Eventide Island. There's like 2 or 3 metal crates like that on Eventide, and you can use it to kill every single enemy on the entire island pretty easily if you can learn that trick. It's particularly useful for killing the Hinox, actually, because if you hit it just right, it's like, and then it just dies, and it's super fast, super easy. So people are always stressed out about Eventide, but that's like a trick you can use to like totally take advantage of the mechanics. So up ahead we have some more cliffs, and again, remember that I don't actually have the paraglider at this point in the recording, so this is before I ever actually made it back to the temple. So I'm trying to work my way downwards, but these cliffs are pretty high, so a trick to avoid dying right here if you don't have the paraglider yet is you can actually jump onto the nearby wall on purpose and then climb downwards until you're far enough down where you can drop down with B, so that you reduce the total falling distance, so that when you do fall, that you don't take any damage. Can I make that jump? I think I can. I think it'll be fine. No, never mind. What? Invisible wall, apparently. I cannot pick these up. That's sad. I'm depressed now. My plans to lure them over to the explosive barrels ended in failure. That's okay, I can just take them all out individually. One of my favorite tactics for a two-hander actually is to use the running dash attack, so you just hold down the sprint button and then press the attack button at the last minute to smack them. It's really great to initiate, especially with two-handers, because it can knock them to the ground and stuff like that. It just does a lot of damage. You can even switch to other weapons after that. This chest is not a skull chest, so apparently I didn't need to kill all those enemies at all. Oops. I also kind of find it funny that you get fire arrows for this, and that's what you can use to hit those explosive barrels to kill the scout if you really wanted to. It's kind of weird because you'd have to sneak past the scout just to get to the fire arrows to kill the scout if you were going to do it that way, I guess. So there are a lot of enemy encampments in Breath of the Wild, and most of them have skull chests, which will reward you with goodies after you've defeated all of the enemies in the encampment. Except for that encampment I was just at. That's one of the only exceptions in the game, apparently. I think the game is trolling me. Anyways, there are 3 reasons to go to enemy encampments, in my opinion. One of them is for the skull chest rewards, which those will reappear every blood moon, so I could come back to the same enemy encampment and get opals once more. Now, as a comment, though, most of the goodies you can get in skull chests are usually better farmed somewhere else. There are much more efficient places to get opals, just in general. However, if I'm specifically going out of my way to get opals and I need to collect a bunch, it might be worth marking the locations of specific enemy encampments that have those particular goodies. So if I want opals, if I'm trying to farm as many as possible, maybe I do want to go to this enemy encampment, and that would be a reason why you'd want to. The second reason to go to enemy encampments, in my opinion, is just for the challenge, or change of pace. In this example, I'm trying to be all stealthy, and I'm like one-shotting enemies with bows, just to be careful, trying to see how many of the scouts and such I can kill before I really go in and attack the guys in the middle. And that's all cool, so self-imposed challenges, or maybe you time yourself, you know, whatever. There's a bunch of different things you could do. The third reason is for weapons, or is farming weapons or arrows. And for example, in this particular recording, there are 3 boko weapons that were leaning up against this log, and once the enemies in the middle saw me, they ran forward and grabbed those wooden boko clubs. Now that's all great, those are not particularly great weapons. However, it is important to note because later encampments will have even higher tier weapons. So I could, for example, climb into a nearby tree and then just sail into the encampment and land right next to them, and they'll only notice me kind of like once I'm landing. So if they see me at the last moment and I just land right next to the weapons, I can loot them all and warp away. So that's a really great tactic, especially for collecting like dragon bone weapons. That's pretty common in enemy encampments. So if you find a couple encampments that have a lot of dragon bone weapons, you could collect them if you're going for a bone build, such as using the Radiant Armor or the Phantom Ganon set. There are several different places throughout Breath of the Wild where a torch is required, and for various shrines and such, so it's kind of nice to have a torch in your inventory, but like, you don't have to. But you just swing it through a flame, this will set it on fire, and then from that point you can actually walk around, and you can actually hold Y to hold the torch forward. I don't think most people even realize they can do that. If you hold Y, Link will hold it forward. Makes it really easy to hold it for a second on something and set things on fire, such as enemies or these crates here. And by the way, that's actually a tactic you could have done at the very beginning of the game, because our first weapon that we get was actually some of those tree branches and then a torch that was behind the old man. So you could have technically at the very beginning of the game just set a bunch of enemies on fire, although as I expressed earlier, setting enemies on fire doesn't really do much damage. What it actually does is it sets their wooden weapons on fire. And then you lose the weapons, so that's kind of a thing. Another way of setting things on fire is to use flint. You can drop flint next to campfires, such as this one that's on the Great Plateau, is like hinting at the fact you can do that. But if you place flint next to a pile of wood, or an existing campfire, and then smack it with a metal weapon, it will then create a spark, which then sets the wood on fire. So generally speaking, though, I think that enemy encampments are more worthwhile, for example, if you are fighting higher tier enemies. So say, for example, you're needing Moblin Guts for a particular set, and Moblin Guts are pretty rare, but they spawn more often on higher tier enemies. So what you really want is you want an enemy encampment that has, like, 2 or 3 black or white Moblins, and that's really what you're looking for, so that they have a higher chance of giving you Moblin Guts. And that would be one of the reasons why you'd want to go to an enemy encampment. However, though, I will say that some of these lower tier ones do have a benefit if you want to farm for arrows. That's because enemies don't do as much damage when they're lower tier like these red boko ones are. But if you have an encampment like that one I was at previous, where you can steal the wooden boko clubs, because there were 3 enemies in the middle that had 3 boko clubs, and there was 2 enemy scouts. And then what you do is you actually drop on the ground on purpose 3 boko bows. So you collect some ahead of time, then you drop them in that encampment. Now you have 5 red bokoblins that all have boko bows. They'll all shoot arrows at you. Again, they can all shoot up to 10 arrows that will pluck into the ground a piece, and then after that they'll stop appearing for a little bit. But if you collect all 50 arrows, then run away, and then once the enemies disappear off the edge of your vision, then run back into the encampment. They all still have boko bows, and you can come in and farm another 50 arrows. So you can very easily end up with hundreds of arrows by farming it this way. So Skyrim released several years before Breath of the Wild did, and a lot of people were kind of raving about how it had such a huge overworld, and there was a lot of stuff to do, a lot of quests. It was very exciting, lots of things to explore, all kinds of goodies all over the place. And so it created quite a buzz in the gaming community and such. But then Breath of the Wild came out, and the land of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild is 5 times the size, so just a little bit bigger. So one of the things you'll find about this game is you'll be seeing other fans talk about it online, whether it's in Reddit posts or it's on a forum or something, and they'll be like, oh, you know, the best place to farm for this, or an awesome location for this one thing, or this quest, you need to go to such and such location. I'm just going to throw words out there, like Rutile Lake. Go to Rutile Lake. And you're like, where is that? This is a massive map, as I just expressed. So how do you even go about finding this? And you're trying to figure out other places online where you could figure out where that location is. So what I'm going to provide for you guys is in the description of this video, there's a link to the Zelda Dungeon interactive map. There's a whole bunch of interactive maps online. Overall, I think the Zelda Dungeon one is the best for multiple reasons, but one of the reasons that I really like it is because you can type in locations. So just whether you're using this walkthrough or other ones, if people reference a location, you can then type in the search bar the name of the location and it will take you right there on the map. And then you can zoom out and figure out exactly where it is and then compare that to your game. It's super nice. So that's one of the nicest features about the Zelda Dungeon one in particular. So you can use a variety of different maps that are online. I think overall that's the best one, and I will be using it extensively throughout this walkthrough. Another thing you can do is you can make an account on their wiki and then it just log in the one time, whatever, and just tell it to remember your device. But you can do that on your phone or on your computer, and then you can mark down the locations of Koroks. You can mark them as complete, and then that way you can you can get a full list of all your completion status for things in Breath of the Wild. As long as you don't like delete your cookies or something, then that could be problems. But otherwise, it's fine, and it'll keep track of all your progress. That's one potential option. I know most people will probably prefer to use their phone just because that's like what a lot of people have available to them. I think a computer is a lot easier to use, but whatever you want to do. But it is a handy thing. So whether you're looking for a particular location or you are trying to keep track of your progress, I think in both cases the Zelda Dungeon interactive map is super awesome, and I highly recommend you use it. For the last part of this video, I'm going to be attacking a Stone Talus. This is probably the greatest challenge on the Great Plateau. Totally optional, you don't have to do this. What this thing does is it has two arms. It'll like kind of throw itself on the ground and suck up some rocks out of the ground. And in this video, I was actually confused. I thought I was supposed to attack the feet, but I now realize you're supposed to attack the arms. Also, just so you know, your bombs have separate cooldowns, so you can switch back and forth. So here, for example, I'm going to throw a round bomb. I didn't throw it close enough. Again, I was trying to attack the feet. That is a mistake. What I need to do is attack the arm. So next I'm going to throw a bomb at the left arm and then blow it up, and this will destroy it, which causes it to be stunned. So that's one way of stunning them. The other way is to shoot the ore with an arrow when you're on the ground or in midair, and that works pretty good as well. So again, as I talked about earlier, is that sledgehammers are pretty good against ore. This is a very good weapon to use against these guys. If you have enough time, you can actually use a spin attack, which is called the Great Spin, when using a two-hander, and that's really good against these guys. They drop all kinds of ore when they're defeated, which you can sell for rupees, which is awesome. Alright, so that basically concludes the Great Plateau. You can optionally kill the Stone Talus to get some ore for additional rupees, which is very handy. You can get some wood from the trees here, which is kind of nice, although you can kind of do that anywhere. But you blow them up to get wood, and those are very handy for making campfires so that you can make yourself switch to different days. It's particularly useful to deal with rain, so you can make it stop raining whenever you want. But that's very useful just traveling around. I recommend you have some wood on you regardless, and so just do that. I'd rather do it sooner rather than later. But anyways, that's pretty much everything we wanted to do on the Great Plateau. There's a bunch of goodies we want to get. We want to cook a bunch of meals for stamina in particular up ahead. So I'm actually going to show that on Mount Satori, which is amazing. But other than that, we're pretty much done with the Great Plateau in particular. So you can hang around and get some more Koroks. Again, use the Zelda Dungeon interactive map to figure out where those are. I'm not really going to talk about them here, but you can totally do that if you want to get some optional goodies. But yeah, other than that, we're pretty much done with the Great Plateau. So that concludes this video as well. As always, a huge thanks goes to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this possible. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, be sure to throw a like on it, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content just like this. Remember to stay awesome, have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.